Okay, so I make it 11 o'clock. So you up and ready over there, Sandra?
Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, good. Fantastic. So good morning, everyone. I'm Olivia from DIA. Sorry about the, I'm joined with Sandra, who has her fairy companion, I think, in the background, walking about. So it's a little bit noisy.
Let me kick her out. Hang on. You keep talking.
Okay, so that's the thing with pets when you're doing these things. They always have a way of wanting to join in and getting involved with the fun and the learning. So bless them. So just
all right,
we're ready. Cool. Right. So thank you. That's much better. Apologies to your furry companion there, Sandra, for hoofing her out or him out. So sorry.
That's right. She might want to come back in a minute.
Okay, so today, everyone, we have a brand new subject, which is alcohol and drug awareness. So what we've done is we worked with Sandra, who's the subject expert, and she has worked with us to develop some learning around this really important subject. Obviously, it's been around for such a long time. Drink driving, drug driving, all the rest of it, and awareness is nothing new, but there are still so many issues around this that we need to look at. So important for trainers, for driver trainers, rider trainers, to be aware of some of the figures. And so Sandra's going to go through some of those. What she's going to do this morning is go through some more about the drug side of things, because what we've done is we've also developed a short e-learning course, which is going to be available for you very shortly, in the next couple of days, that you'll be able to access that. And we've also got a classroom course day, which we have accredited via the First Aid Awards. So that's you will receive, on attendance and successful completion of that, you will receive a certificate, dual branded, accredited certificate from us and our the awarding body, that will allow you to say, hey, I've taken some training in this, it's been verified by an external awarding body, and it then allows you to then obviously channel all of that extra knowledge back into your training. Obviously, we all know the drink drive tolerance things in England, but there are some key information, some key stats and key things that you will be able to include in your lessons to your trainees, whether they are provisional licence holders, full licence holders, fleet, whoever it may be, instructor training, that type of thing for your PDI. So then obviously then they can pass that message on to those guys as well. So really important information. Before I go on, I'll just get Sandra to say hi to everyone, and just a little introduction of yourself, Sandra, your background, if you wouldn't mind, and your expertise in this area.
Morning, everybody. In terms of my background, so as you are ADI, still working, doing that, on a sort of a part-time basis, I suppose. I've moved away really from being in car, and I tend to do more classroom-based work now. So driver CPC, I'm a qualified transport manager. I've just finished a PhD in driver behaviour as well. So I'm kind of going down that route, but I still keep my hand in, because I think it's important to be able to still practice those skills. And as we know, every 4 years that dreaded letter arrives. So that's really what I'm working at the moment.
Fantastic. Yeah. Okay. That's great. Thank you very much. So in a moment, I'm going to kind of hand over to Sandra, who's going to go through the content with us this morning. And what we're going to do is look at some of the stats and some information around the drugs. And what we'll also do is tell you a little about what the classroom course is going to consist of as well. So I'm going to move on. So Sandra, just tell me when you would like me to move to the next slide, so I'm going to do that now.
Thank you. Okay. So really what we want to do this morning is just give you a taster of, just in terms of the stats, what is out there, improving people's knowledge. It's certainly something I've found over the years. I've sort of, in my background, I've delivered quite a lot of drink awareness courses. in terms of sort of the rehabilitation side of things, but not so much the drugs. And I think, you know, particularly as perhaps we're getting older, maybe, you know, the drug side of things is changing. We're not aware of what's out there. So I just wanted to build a course that just allowed us to have a little bit more of an understanding, you know, not an in-depth knowledge, but something that actually when we're sat in a car, maybe we've got an idea of the sort of clues that we might be looking for. You know, perhaps if you've got a regular pupil, you know, their behavior might have changed, or they're acting differently or something like that. And maybe it will give you a little bit more information in which to perhaps make, you know, sort of more reasoned decisions, if you like, in terms of what you're faced with. So just in terms of the background, in terms of the extent of the problem, people certainly with the drink driving side of things, the number of people who have been killed as a result of drink driving collisions hasn't actually really changed in the last 10 years or so. It's stayed fairly consistent, and it's averaging around about 240 deaths per annum. What you're perhaps not necessarily going to be able to tell is maybe the number of near misses that have happened, people who are doing it and getting away with it. Obviously, you're not going to be able to, you know, have detailed numbers on those, but certainly in terms of the fatality numbers, it's still sitting at, you know, maybe sort of, you know, 10–20% of what the national figure is anyway. Other numbers that we've got in terms of the casualties for drink driving, the recorded figure has just gone up 1% in 2018 from 2017. And one of the issue with the stats is that they tend to operate a year, if not 2 years behind. With the normal fatality figures, they can be, as we know, you know, perhaps sort of, you know, a quarter. They're done every quarter. And then for the figures for a year, we tend to get them in sort of the June, July time for the following year. Drink drive doesn't work like that. It's much, much later in terms of getting those numbers. So in terms of, as Olivia said, you know, we have got growing figures in terms of the drink drive. One of the issues is that, you know, we perhaps have less enforcement out there. We know there's been a lot of austerity. There's been quite a big drop in the number of traffic officers out there. And that's partly contributing perhaps to, you know, maybe that lack of enforcement and maybe the lack of people being caught. Do you want to do the next slide, Liv?
I was just going to say, people feel that they can get away with it more. You know, you've got that kind of personality in the mix as well, haven't you? So they'll push the boundaries, and knowing that there isn't the people that there to catch them as much as what.
Absolutely. From my own part, I live very rurally, so people are fully aware of where people are going to be sat in terms of their marked cars or unmarked cars in some cases, so they will know which roads to use. Whereas if you're in a town or city, then very often the numbers will be much lower, because actually you've got better choices. It's easier to get a taxi or public transport. Absolutely.
Okay, brilliant. I'll move on for you. There you go.
Okay. So just a few figures for you, as it says, in terms of number of people that were banned in, 2018, 2019, it's averaging about 60 people every working day. That's just for the drug driving. In terms of the screening for breath tests, what we've seen is actually a 41% reduction in the number of people who are actually being screened in terms of the roadsides, but in terms of actually the number of positive tests, that's gone up 16%. So as you can see, you know, it really is a big problem out there, even if you take it, you know, as a percentage of the number of drivers that we've got on the roads.
Fantastic. Okay. Okay. Next slide for you at the moment.
Yes, please.
There we go.
Okay, so here's that confirmation, as we said. So we've just looked at the drug testing. As you can see, 2015, 520 roadside breath tests, but that dropped to 326, which, as I said, is a 41% reduction. But we saw a 4% increase in the number of positive tests or refusal. And a lot of people, perhaps, you know, when they are angry, they've been stopped, maybe they're quite indignant about it. What they don't seem to realise is that, you know, if you do refuse, regardless of whether you're over or not, it would still result in an automatic ban. You know, and I have seen drivers come through the system who have completely refused just out of principle and ended up without a license for 12 months. You know, so there's a lot at stake.
Yes, absolutely. That's very serious.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, so just this particular slide here. So just to put this issue into context now, this is a slide that I found on one of the news sites. And as you can see, there's 10 times more drug arrests than drink arrests in Merseyside, but that rises to 19 times more in Lincolnshire. If you think what we said in terms of if you think about what we said in terms of the urban as opposed to the rural, you can see perhaps there's much higher numbers in terms of the rural.
She wants to join in again.
Someone got shut out, they didn't like it. She'll shut up in a minute. Okay. As you can see, as I said, there's a big comparison between the urban and the rural there. So
yes, absolutely. Like you were saying, you know, in town areas, you know, people, it's so easy then just to jump in a cab, isn't it, and things like that. But when you are a bit more remote, you know, you're far more reliant on your car. So it can be more of an issue.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So what would the course cover? So this is the classroom course that we're looking at. The e-learning course will be just a shortened version of this, but there's so much more to be gained from the classroom course because you get the interaction with the trainer, with Cassandra, and you know, all the props and all the tools, all that interactivity that you don't get on an online course. Online course is great; it gives you lots of information. But you know, we obviously strongly advise you both. Plus, you get the accredited certificate from that on the classroom as well. So, this is Sandra just run you through the classroom course.
Okay, so what I'm going to do with the classroom course is I'm going to split it into almost two halves. So we're going to look at the alcohol side first of all, and then we'll spend the second half of the day looking at the drugs. Now, as Olivia said, you know, lots of props. Unfortunately, it's not going to be real props, as you can imagine. But we'll do our best. So what we're going to look at first of all is, you know, trying to look at the reasons for alcohol misuse, because at the end of the day, you know, very often alcohol misuse is because of perhaps, you know, personal issues. It can be an addiction, so it's a psychological issue, rather than people who are just doing it and perhaps we don't really understand, you know, why they're doing it. So we're talking about more the addiction side of things. We're also going to look at actually the definition of what alcohol is, because we all think we do, but we're going to look kind of at the science behind it. We'll also look at what the current limits are, because the UK currently has some of the highest, if not the highest, limits in the world. You know, rightly or wrongly, other countries have gone, you know, certainly dropped it down. As we know, Scotland has been lower for a few years, and they really have seen some benefits in terms of that reduction. Yeah. So we'll look at what the legislation is and actually what that means really. If you lined up all the drinks on the bar, what does that actually look like in reality? Because very often it's all very well saying, oh, well, it's 35 micrograms, you know, but what does that actually equate to?
Yeah, that's it, isn't it? It's the same thing. Like you're just saying, well, 10 meters from a junction, you should leave. Well, what's that mean to somebody? So that's a really important point. What is for 35 micrograms in a drink, or what type of drink? Because it's different types of, you know, beer, wine, spirits, that type of thing as well, isn't it? Different concentrations.
So I think it's an important understanding, and we'll look at different drinks and the different measures, and obviously just making sure that everyone has an understanding of actually how you can calculate what the units look like. Very importantly, we will look at what the health implications are, you know, not just from the, you know, the one or two drinks at the weekend, but those who are drinking consistently and for quite sustained periods of time. And we'll do an exercise that looks at lots of different health issues and really make it a good workshop. So it's a practical exercise in the sense that, you know, you're feeding back to others based on some of the research that you've done. Okay. We will look at the effects of processing alcohol. We'll look at the time it takes. We'll look at how it's processed. So for example, you know, it takes 5 minutes actually to get to your brain, and that's that kind of warm fuzzy feeling. We'll look at that. We'll look at certainly sparkling drinks, because actually you can get drunk quicker on a sparkling drink than a flat drink, you know, just like a normal glass of wine. So we'll look at the science behind that, and obviously the sort of biological effects as well. We'll look at the methods of testing. So, you know, yes, we know that, you know, you can do the standard breathalyzer, and we'll look at a little bit at the history behind that. I quite like the social history side of things, so we'll touch on that, but we'll also look at the different ways to do it in terms of perhaps changes in your complexion, changes in your eyes, in terms of your pupil size, but also looking at things like field impairment tests as well, and we'll have a go at some of those, because for people to actually be able to deliver those, certainly from the police side of things, they, you know, they have to go on sort of quite long courses, and it's, you know, it's quite particular, but we'll investigate all of those. And then we'll also look at the legislation. So what are the different offences? What do they mean? You know, so the sort of the dispelling some of the myths, for example. So you know, if you're sat in a car and your keys are in your pocket and those types of things, and no intention to drive, you know, what would the implications be? What's the definition of a road? So we'll look at all of those, so people have a really good understanding and a really solid base in which that if anyone actually asks them, they can give some good advice to someone else.
Yeah, those are really important questions, because they are you know, they are frequently asked. People, you know, ADIs and learners and lots of people, they, you know, as you say, there are a lot of myths, and so working through that and cutting through that would be really useful, I think, because it's like you say, you know, well, what if I've got a keyless car, or, you know, the engine's on, but you know, the key can't be in ignition. You know, a certain amount of common sense has got to be applied here, but all of those things, you know, as you say, what constitutes being on a road? Just sitting in the car with having the keys, but in the passenger seat or in the back of the car, you know, it's things like that where prosecutions can have and, you know, can take place, can't they still? So, yeah, that's so fantastic. That'd be really interesting to find more about.
It's also looking at some of the myth bustings, because people will, you know, give you all these stories about, oh, my mate got away with it by doing this, that and the other, and you know, historically we've had things like, oh, you know, if you suck a copper coin and all the rest of it. We haven't had copper coins since the early 70s, so, you know, good luck doing that, because that's really not going to, you know, help. But as we said, it's just really dispelling some of those. You know, it's a little bit more lighthearted, but it, you know, gets rid of some of the rubbish.
And also, yeah, we get to hear what some of the myths, you know, maybe some of the more obscure ones going around, and just you know, squashing them, because, you know, it's as you say, it's a bit more of a light-hearted part of the day. So that'd be really interesting. So other parts, which is the second half of the day.
Absolutely. So as I said, we're going to split this into a game of two halves, and, you know, things are changing so quickly. So I want to look at the different types of drugs out there. So I've identified perhaps some of the more common ones and put them into sort of groups of drugs. So whether you've got the psychoactive, those types of things, or the steroid-based ones. So we're just going to look at them more as a group. And then for each of those, we're going to look at what form they can take. So do they come in, you know, like a vial? Do they come in tablets? Is it a powder? You know, and what you potentially might be looking for, and perhaps some of the paraphernalia that goes with it, you know, because there is so much out there. We'll look at if someone perhaps is taking it, really how much they have to take and the tolerance within that. But also then if they start to withdraw, what are you looking for? You know, is it the standard sort of shaking, or is it the complexion, you know, just their general behaviour, those types of things. One of the issues I did want to look at was looking at different street names of drugs, because there are, you know, without a lie, there are so many of them. And I want, you know, perhaps if people have heard names, I want them to at least think, oh yes, okay, I've heard that before, and feel confident to perhaps go and look it up, because, you know, they are street names, they are shorthand, if you like. It's not, well, I take cannabis. They'll come up with all different sorts of things.
Of course, there are, yeah, like you say, even if somebody...
It's a slang.
Exactly. If somebody just drops it into a conversation and refers to something, at least then your ears will prick up and think, oh, I've heard of that, as you say. You might not know what it is at the time, but you know then you need to act on it and go and look it up.
Absolutely. And, you know, I've got some books that, you know, I'll certainly bring along and say, look, you know, these are really good reference books that I've used in the past, you know, and actually it's not a bad one to have kind of at your fingertips. But, you know, obviously, again, you've got things like the internet as well, but we'll point you in, we'll sort of signpost you in the right direction.
Brilliant.
We'll look at some of the health effects of doing this, you know, not from a sort of withdrawal point of view, but actually, you know, if people are taking this, even on a recreational basis, what damage is it doing? Because it has to be doing something. But then, you know, directly affecting in terms of what we do for a living, what effect is it going to have on someone's driving? You know, is it going to mean that they drive slower and they're more pronounced with their driving, or are they actually going to become, you know, completely reckless? And you might be able to see that change because you know, if you know that person in particular, you'll be able to get more of an idea. But also, you know what the norm is. So if someone is driving completely out of that, why are they driving out of that? And again, you can link that to things, as we said, like, you know, the size of their pupils. Perhaps it's a new pupil in terms of a driving pupil that you've got, in terms of the changes then within their eyes. You know, so little things like that, and really just knowing what to look for.
Yes.
The final point that we're going to consider is, you know, actually, how can people make a change? Now, we are not counsellors, you know, we're not sort of therapists in the traditional sense, and, you know, it's not necessarily our role to do it, but we are coaches. So actually looking at different conversations that we can have, and also, again, where we can perhaps direct people who, you know, do need to get some help, and what services generally are available to them.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just learning the limitations of your role. As you say, we're not counsellors, we're not anything like that, and that's not our position, but it's knowing where to refer people and having that list of in your armoury, isn't it, in case you think this person needs a bit of help or whatever.
Absolutely, and there's there's a bit of a discussion going on one of the forums today. Someone said, I'm not a counsellor, I am a counsellor rather, and I have to listen and all the rest of it. And there's been a few kind of positives and negatives against that. At the end of the day, people will tell us things in those, that little box.
Yeah.
You do build up a relationship, you do build up a rapport. Someone might go, my friend needs help because. So it's really knowing what advice you can give, without, as we say, becoming the proper therapist.
Without overstepping. Just back to the health benefits of the drinking. I know the University of Sussex, they did a survey for, it was about 800 to 900 people for dry January last year, and before and after their month of drinking, and found that around 71% people slept better. Around 67% had more energy, 58% had lost weight, and around 54% had better skin. So there we go. Just a few interesting so worth doing it. I know
absolutely,
but yeah, the health benefits of that are very good. Okay, so moving on to classes of drugs.
Thank you. What we're going to do is we're going to, as I said, the course has been broken down, and we're going to look at a variety of drugs that are out there. So what the next 3 slides really do is just show you that I'm sure you're aware, drugs are split into class A, B, and C. And if you're not necessarily familiar with the different types of drugs, you're not necessarily going to know perhaps which class it comes into. And it's more a case of, if you know what class it comes into, that's going to then affect the penalty that someone might have in terms of that enforcement side of things. So as you can see, the class A includes things like crack cocaine, crystal meths, ecstasy, heroin, LSD, and some of those we will obviously be focusing on because they are the most severe and the most serious types of drugs. So I think we are going to cover cocaine, heroin, certainly LSD, and all of those. And again, it's getting rid of some of those myths. I mean, and I'm not suggesting any of you do this, but in terms of things like crystal meth, it's quite a well-known thing that actually, if you boil up loads of night nurse, you can make crystal meth out of it. So it's not a difficult one to go.
Sandra.
No, well, but it's a common fact. I mean, it's not a secret. It's what you can find that on the internet. It's not difficult.
I've never looked that up, and I'm sat here going, "Oh wow, I'm not."
Yeah, exactly. And it's one of those little things that actually people, if people are taking tons and tons of night nurse, which I've known people do because they want to sleep. Actually, it can, you can go one step further, and people will do that.
Yeah.
People are buying tons and tons of this stuff, perhaps for the wrong reason.
Yeah.
So, as we said, we want to touch on these things because, ignorance is not a defense in that sense. And, as I said, I'm not suggesting anyone goes and does it, but it's having that understanding that those things are relatively accessible.
Yes.
So it's not a street corner, kind of thing in some cases.
You can just go and get it in your local Boots, and then that's
absolutely. And people do. People will buy this stuff. To go and do it. And as I said, it's not a secret. That's not a sort of a dark web kind of thing. It's public information, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Lovely. Class B.
It's weekend sorted.
Yeah.
So class B, as we said, not necessarily as serious, but still clearly have some negative health effects on these ones, and obviously the addiction side of things. And we'll look at all of that. We'll break some of these down. So as it says, class B, it's amphetamines, cannabis, codeine, ketamine. You may well be, for example, familiar with ketamine, which is like a tranquilizer. I'll stop in a minute. And cannabinoids as well. So, lots and lots of different things went under class B. And if we go on to the class C, sorry, it only rings about 4 times. So this is perhaps considered to be the least serious, but obviously still an offence. And as we said, we'll look at those. So we're going to look at steroids in a moment. And you've got things like diazepam, GHB, which you might know as the date rape drug, and CAT as well. Now, a lot of these will also, in terms of the drug side of things, we'll also look at sort of prescription, because a couple of years ago, the government tightened up on what were permissible limits and amounts on certain drugs, and anyone who exceeds those. So things like diazepam could fall into that, and we'll consider some of those as well in terms of what the levels are.
Okay, brilliant. Okay. Have a little look at this next one.
So looking at the penalties then, as I said, so, as we said, Class A is the most serious. So this is for possession of an illegal drug. So if you are found in possession of these are the maximum penalties, depending on obviously how much you've got, whether it's a first offence, for example. So Class A, anything up to seven years in prison, going down to Class C, which could mean up to 2 years in prison. But as we said, it depends on whether this is a first or multiple offences. It will also depend on how much you'll be found in possession of, in terms of, for example, this issue with personal use. Some drugs, things like Class A, they might give you a warning, perhaps if it's a very, very small amount on the first one, but then more than 2 offences, or two warnings rather, then they will actually take you to court.
Yeah. Okay.
So the penalties then for producing or supplying, as we've said, so very, very serious in this one. They will take it, to the extremes, if you like, and perhaps rightly so. So this, this is not the argument for the personal use. So Class A, anything up to life in prison. Then for the other 2, anything up to 14 years in prison, just for producing or supplying. Okay, so yeah, if you have got your crystal meth factory in your kitchen, then it's going to be quite serious.
Yes. Okay, so yeah, give an example of these types of steroids. I've heard of them, but knowing about them is I'm all ears. Yeah,
so as I said, what we want to do on this particular course is keep perhaps a format going for each of these, so it's very structured, because it is a lot of information to take in, and it's quite difficult for people to perhaps, if they're, I'm not immersed in that world, it's not something I've ever had to deal with. So, just really trying to keep that structure through. So the first one we're going to look at is the anabolic steroids. So if Olivia can go on to the next slide for me. Okay, so it's a prescription-only medicine, but also can be produced for veterinary purposes, and it is considered a category C, so a Class C drug. So if you remember, that was up to 2 years in prison, depending on possession or supply. As we said, it has to be licensed in terms of the supply, so hence the prescription side of things. And very often people will take it to for sort of, the strength, the stamina, so the performance-enhancing drugs. Also for particularly things like bodybuilders as well, and they'll buy perhaps quite large quantities of this.
You sort of hear that phrase, don't you, anabolic steroids, in like the press or the media when it things like sports events and things like that. That's where I've heard that before.
It is, and what you'll find, particularly with people who are perhaps, as we know, with the sports side of things, they do have to be licensed. So taking any form of drug is going to be picked up in terms of that random testing, but it's that sort of, not the underworld market, but it's that sort of private market that this is going to have certainly more of an effect on. Okay, and we've all seen the pictures of the bodybuilders and the Arnold Schwarzeneggers of his day. We've all seen that. So that's kind of what this would be perhaps used for in terms of an illegal side.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so in terms of their form and appearance, as it says, it can be found in tablet, so liquid, capsule form. So people will take it perhaps from an injection side of things. It is, as I said, it's a prescription drug. So very often when it's sold, it will be sold in its original packaging, certainly in terms of perhaps the tablets, so it would be very obvious what it was. The problem then comes that if you've got sort of more of that, as you said, that sort of underworld market, and you've just got lots of tablets in front of you, and it would be very difficult for someone to actually say, oh, I know what that is. They're just lots of coloured tablets or a little vial of something. And that's, perhaps where the difficulty comes. And obviously from a police enforcement side, they would send it off for testing in terms of the labs. In terms of the sort of the access for people, as we said, it is a prescription drug. So people who are going to access it will normally get it from the internet. They are going to sort of, search some of those sites. One of the common markets in terms of the source would be some of the Eastern Bloc countries. And obviously then people are importing it into the country and hoping that it's not picked up perhaps through customs. It's not known as a street drug in the sense that you're not going to find it. You're not going to be able to buy this on street corners. That's not the sort of market that this particular one happens to sit into. But in terms of just sort of finding out in terms of the cost, if you bought 100 tablets, it's around about £20. So it's not an inaccessible
drug
for people, if you like.
Yeah. Yeah. You just don't know, do you? You just think, oh, are we talking hundreds? Are we talking thousands? But 20 quid for 100 tablets, that's nothing, is it?
No, absolutely.
No. Okay, thank you. And then effects of use. So.
Okay, just while it loads up, you've got slow. One of us has got a slow internet, I think. There we are. So in terms, as I said, it can be injected. People will inject this directly into muscle tissue. It's not a nice way to do it, but they are, as we said, the gym types, the bodybuilders, and they are going to have this need to obviously improve their performance, improve their look. And this is perhaps, one of the, well, I've got to do it, and we're going to get on with it. But in terms of, just to give you an idea of statistics, John Moores University have estimated that in the UK, around 30,000 men over 40 are using steroids at the moment, and that's double the number that was 5 years ago.
Wow. That's
so
only in 5 years.
Say that again.
Only in 5 years.
Yes. Yeah, it's doubled in 5 years.
Okay,
yeah.
That's quite surprising. I mean, I don't know. Is that surprising? It's a lot, isn't it?
I think it's a huge number.
Yeah.
If we have this sort of, perhaps this, I suppose, idealised view that drugs is kind of street corners and perhaps a certain element of society, you don't necessarily think that that over 40 group would maybe fall into that, but clearly it does.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah. So in terms of really some adverse effects, and this is just pointing out, some of the things that we said that, you as a driver trainer and ADI could perhaps be looking out for. And some of these we've touched on already. So this again is relating to the steroids. So personality changes, if someone is, you get used to somebody perhaps and they really do have a sudden change. That could possibly be because they're starting taking something, or perhaps they've got that sort of need to take some more. Violent behaviour, so perhaps prone to outbursts and things that again haven't been necessarily prevalent in that personality before. Paranoia from extended use, so believing things and people are saying things about you that aren't the case, and as we say, it really can be extreme. A decrease in mental health, which is obviously that's the big talking point at the moment, and rightly so. So, as we said, people, you're just looking for those changes, really. The pupils, in terms of your eyes, have a yellow colour. We're not talking pupils as in your student.
Generally liver, isn't it? The yellow, like the whites of your eyes, that's a sign of liver damage? It
is, yeah. It's what's called bilirubin. So, yes, if you have a damaged liver, that can cause it, but the pupils will also have a yellow colour. So that's one. Remember, it's not the whites of your eyes; it's the actual pupils itself will have a yellow tinge. Very often with the liver side of things, it's the whites of your eyes that then would go yellow.
Right.
And if you've got jaundice, I've seen someone before, it goes like custard. It's literally like bird's eye custard. Oh. Very, very yellow. And also poor breath odour. And I appreciate that. That can mean a lot of things. But again, it's perhaps looking for changes in people that perhaps haven't had that issue before.
Yeah. It's the same with anything. We're just that extra set of eyes and ears on the ground as trainers, and when we're talking about safeguarding and lots of other things that we talk about and that ADIs need to be aware of, and they are aware of, in a lot of them are. It's just, as you say, it's knowing how they are usually, and looking for changes, and sometimes subtle, but sometimes more significant changes in them that you've got to try and think, well, could it be that? Could it be that? And so you're kind of going through like this mental flow chart, aren't you, to try and pinpoint what it is. You're just sitting there looking, listening, watching for clues to try. So the more knowledge that we've got, it could be this, it could be fall into a drink, it could be fall into drugs, it could fall into safeguarding or any other thing, then we're going to think, okay, at least I can't do anything necessarily directly about that because that's not part of my role, but I can do this much at least and try and get this person some help or understanding with it.
And it's also having the confidence with that person that you're sat with, and actually if you are in any doubt, is having the confidence to stop that lesson and confront it.
Exactly.
Because at the end of the day, you are the supervising driver.
Yes.
It's the end of the day, it's saying, actually, no, I'm not going to do this. And sometimes that can be a very difficult conversation, and it can be quite unnerving, perhaps particularly if you have got someone who's a little bit volatile. But it's sticking to your guns, because at the end of the day, it's your reputation as well.
It is, and I think that is a really key point. Is that having those difficult conversations. As you say, not confronting so much, but just discussing it, highlighting that there is something not quite right here. There are ways of doing it, and obviously Sandra will help you with things like that, because a lot of ADIs will have those conversations. I mean, we get them on the help desk nearly every day. There's someone saying, I've got an issue with this. It might not be a drink or drugs thing, but it could be an issue, and they have to deal with it. And it's I need to know I'm on firm ground. I need to know where I stand. I need to know where the pupil stands, and I need to know implications for both myself, my business, my pupil, my family, if it got that bad. So it's a whole kind of ripple effect that these things can. And so the more armed, the more knowledge that we've got, then the better we'll be to deal with it. Hopefully we won't come across it, but let's it's unfortunately it's more common than we think.
Yeah, I mean, in my 15 years of whatever it is of training, I've only come across it once. It was during a jazz festival, and one of my pupils turned up a little bit late for his lesson, and he had his face completely blue like a Smurf, that he'd gone as a Smurf and he hadn't gone to bed, and it's like, we're not doing this. And you knew he was on something, he was flying somewhere. And it was a conversation about, this is not going to happen, apart from the face. I didn't want to drive around town for an hour with someone who had a very, very bright blue face.
No.
But he was fine, and he took it. We had a relatively good relationship. He'd been a pupil for a while, and it was like, yeah, okay, I get that. I'm off.
Yeah, it's not just that. It's not that just that. Oh, we're not doing this today. It goes way deeper, doesn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
All the implications for them, for their future, for their license, for their livelihood. All of that. Okay, so tolerance.
So as I said, we're going to look at this for each of those. So just a little bit of an understanding, really. And with a lot of these drugs, what happens if someone starts to take it, they'll obviously get a benefit from it. But the more they take it, the less that benefit becomes a bit of a buzz for them. So what they'll do is they'll increase the amount that they're taking, and it becomes that vicious cycle, and they just end up taking more and more. So this really is it's a psychological need that they have rather than a biological need. So it's a little bit different. Sorry, Liv.
No, that's right. So I was going to say, could an example of that then be, that you were talking about the cough syrup and the creating your own class A drug in your kitchen.
Yeah. So
that type of thing, they're taking maybe cough syrup, or it's become like an addiction.
Yes.
And whether it's some sort of psychological or biological, as you say, because they're different types. And then they're thinking, actually, I need more. So they push the boundaries and they look for other ways.
Yeah, and it's a different type of addiction. So it really is a need to have something, as opposed to a physical need, as opposed to I actually just really fancy something, in terms of, I don't know, a bar of chocolate. But so it's a different need, and a lot of the drugs will be like that. But obviously, what they don't want to do, as it says at the bottom, is they don't want to suddenly stop it. So it has to be a defined withdrawal of anything, because particularly with this one, complete muscle collapse and eventually prolonged wheelchair use, depending on how much they've had previously, to then suddenly stop. We're talking perhaps, high-end users as opposed to perhaps the low-level ones.
Yes. Okay. Interesting. Really interesting. Thank you.
Okay, so in terms of why people perhaps take it, some of the benefits will be, as we've said, it tends to be more the gym, bodybuilding, the performance side of things. It's a performance-enhancing drug. So it will increase the muscle, the bulk, and we've all seen those images out there, and perhaps strength as well. But the drawbacks, as we said, so the mood swings, we've talked about the violent behaviour, the changes in personality, high blood pressure and heart disease, liver and kidney cancers, hepatitis, which is where you talked about the yellow eyes, and it just goes on. So there are some benefits for people, but perhaps short-lived in terms of then what the negatives can be in the long term.
Okay.
Okay. So as you said, just so people have really got, perhaps as Olivia said, you hear some of these terms. So roids is one, roid rage, and stacking. That's where people take different types of steroids because they want a particular effect, in terms of how they want their body shape to perhaps be. So as we said, these are just names that you might come across, and we'll look at, as we say, with the different drugs, some of the different slang names that you might hear that someone talks about. As Olivia said, they drop it in conversation, and you just let it go. But actually, all of a sudden now you almost have an idea of what they're talking about, rather than sort of, you know, as we say, that, you know, that blissful ignorance that perhaps some of us have had for many, many years with this, you know, and me included, to be fair.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah. I mean, if you don't know, you don't know, but it's going.
No, absolutely,
which is what we're here to do.
Yeah, and it's not a world that, you know, any of us really get involved with, but you never know whether that's, you know, family, you know, the drivers that we're in, you go into schools, whatever, you just don't know. So, you know, as we say, you know, knowledge is good, it's power.
Yeah, I mean, this is so useful because it's in any part of somebody's life. It's obviously we're talking about it from their professional point of view, from their business, and identifying, hearing things, you know, from pupils, from customers, from clients. But yes, it could be used in anything, like you say. You know, you touch on family and friends and that type of personal life as well. So it could be something where you think, oh, hang on a minute, I've heard of that, and it, you know, alarm bells might start ringing, whereas before they might not have done if you didn't know this.
Yeah, and I found this with my own children, and I've got 3 who are now sort of early 20s, you know, and they've mentioned, you know, people that they've known from perhaps in, you know, from school and the next village down, and oh yeah, well, if you want this, you can get it there, and this, that, and the other. Now I know that they haven't taken anything, but they know full well where to get it if they did. And I was quite shocked by that myself as a parent, because I thought, you know, as we all do, that we've got, you know, wonderful little children running around and they're all, you know, cocooned in a bubble, and they went, oh yeah, you can get it from so and so down in wherever. And I was staggered that how on earth do they know that?
Yeah.
You know, we live somewhere where if they want to go anywhere, I have to drive them because of where we are rurally. They went, oh yeah, just go there. It's just common for them.
It's the world we live in. It's common knowledge. It is common knowledge. Yes. It's social media. It's all that information at our fingertips, literally, isn't it? And this is part of that world. So we gotta stay on top of it.
Absolutely.
Right.
So go on, you can.
Right. Are there any questions? I'm just looking at my colleague Tom. So anyone got any questions? Pop them in the chat box now for us, and we'll happily answer those for you. Just while you're having a little think about that, as I mentioned right at the beginning, there is a one-day course which is accredited, as you've seen, that we've developed with Sandra, and it's all about the drink, the drugs, and as I say, it will be a very interactive day where it's not going to be, you know, lots of stats and lots of things thrown at you. It's going to be, you know, there will be elements of that, but there will be lots of interaction and lightheartedness, and, you know,
it's a workshop.
It is a workshop, and understanding some of your, maybe, dare I say, even humorous terms for certain phrases and certain drugs and things that you might have heard. So and just sort of sharing that information and understanding and learning from each other as well, because there could be people in the group that have had lots of you know, or some experience with this with the pupils, and might be happy to share, this is what happened to me, and, you know, so that's always very useful for everyone else to know. So as I say, so that is the one-day course. We will be giving you a discount on that for everyone who's attended the webinar today on that course. So what we'll be doing is emailing you people very soon with a little discount code to say thank you for attending today off of the classroom course. As I say, there is an e-learning course on there as well. You'll be able to enroll on that really shortly, but if you just have a little look at our website address, diaacademy.co.uk, all of our training is on there now, all of our learning is on there, and we're adding to it all the time. So have a little look on there. There are other e-learning courses on there that you can do that you couldn't do before, and this is going to be the next one on there. As I say, it's going to be probably take you they're very short, so not too long of your time to do, but obviously you can do it in the comfort of your own car, front room, wherever you want to do. So just before we wrap up the session, just wanted to see if there's any questions on there. So we've got Martin has said, yep, looking forward to the workshop. So that's fantastic. That's really good. So we look forward to seeing you on there, Martin. We have got some dates and some locations lined up. And what we're going to do is put on them on Academy to see what ones are the most popular for you. And so if you are part of a local group or an association as well, get in touch with us. We're happy to come and run the course for your group. So if you've got, you know, a meeting every so often and you like this as being part of it as a one day, then we'll be happy to come and do that as well. Okay, so anything else to add at the moment, Sandra? Because I think we're about to wrap the session up now.
Yeah, I think so. Good timing. So yeah, apologies for the dog, first of all. Yeah, so as we said, looking forward to it. It's going to be interactive. It's going to be lots of hands-on sort of activities, those kind of things. Just because, from my training perspective, I don't want to stand there for 7 hours and do lots of work, and people don't learn anything by that. So we will keep it as engaging as possible, and look forward to seeing you there.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, thank you so much, everybody. Really, thank you as well, Sandra, for sharing all of your knowledge. You're, extremely knowledgeable on all of this, and best person for the job. So that's amazing. And yes, we'll release some more dates soon. Everyone that's listening, go on to our academy, diaacademy.co.uk. Have a little look on there. The next couple of days, we'll alert you as well when that this online course is available, but there are others on there as well. So thank you, everyone. You all have a good rest of your Thursday. We're nearly at the end of the week. And I'm hoping the weather isn't too bad where you are. So take care.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.